because it keeps you younger, keeps you healthier, and it helps you lose that fat that you want to lose. Not working out, you're not working on your brain health consistently, it can also shrink, it can get smaller. Strength training's anti-inflammatory effects are beneficial in maintaining a healthy brain environment as well, particularly for middle-aged and older women. Hello and welcome to my new series, a podcast that I'm going to be calling Revitalize. That might change later, but I'm going to stick with that for now because that's what my one-on-one coaching program is called. So we're going to call the podcast Revitalize. Now, this podcast is going to be a little different than my typical videos because typically I coach women over 40 to the body of their dreams. I coach fat loss. But that is not really what I'm super passionate about. I'm still super passionate about coaching women over 40 specifically as they go through hormone changes. And I'll get into the why in just a second. As a 26-year-old guy, I care so much about that. But I care a lot about the brain and optimal health, specifically because my mother was diagnosed with early onset dementia at 57. Now, 63 years later, and I get to see every day the toll it takes on her and the toll it takes on my family, my dad and myself as the caretaker, because it truly is a terrible disease. And she also went through a terrible time through perimenopause and menopause, struggling with anxiety and all the crazy things that happen with hormone changes. Now she still has hot flashes and had horrible hot flashes through the midst of it all. And I truly think that her brain fog was written off from those menopausal symptoms, and she wasn't looked at as soon as she should have been for dementia, at no fault of the doctors. I'm not blaming them. But that is why I coach. That is why I, as a 26-year-old man, coach women over 40, because that is who I truly care about. And I do care about fat loss because it is becoming an epidemic in the country. It already is, with 70% of Americans being overweight or obese. And I know that you, with the hormone changes, are trying everything possible, and it's just not happening. And that's because you need a very specific plan for you. All these fad diets and all these programs that you're trying to do yourself and just slashing calories and working out more, you think it's discipline. It's none of those things. You need a plan that works for you, your hormones, your metabolism, to speed everything up, make everything work like it should, so that you can lose fat and feel comfortable in your clothes again. But along with that comes something even better than the number on the scale, right? Coming with that is optimal health for longevity, protecting your hormones, protecting your brain health. And that is what Revitalize is truly about, is having that long-term health. And so that is what this podcast is going to be about. Today, if you saw the title of the video, it's going to be all about the connection between muscle and the brain. Muscle and optimal health, and why this connection is so important to take care of, not only for your brain, but muscle is incredibly important for fat loss and for the toned look that you'd like to see when you look in the mirror. Just a couple of disclaimers before we get started. I'm not a doctor. I am a nutrition coach. I am not a doctor. I do not have my PhD. So take everything I say with a grain of salt, understanding that I am not a doctor. I'm a professional in the field. I just don't have that degree. So keep that in mind, but I do know what I'm talking about, and all of the information I have came straight from certified sources. So that's just a disclaimer. So let's get into it a little bit. First of all, why is muscle just so important in general for every part of your life? Because muscle is like the cornerstone of your metabolism. Muscle is the cornerstone of longevity. As you age, your muscle naturally deteriorates. As a woman, your muscle deteriorates even faster as you go through peri/menopause. And a lot of that turns into sarcopenia, which is the degradation of muscle as you age. But not only that, it's the kind of insertion of fat where your muscles should be. And the sarcopenia causes a slew of issues and leads to more chronic diseases. So understanding that muscle as you age is incredibly important will set you up for success. So muscle is the metabolic medicine, I like to call it, because it keeps you younger, keeps you healthier, and it helps you lose that fat that you want to lose. And we'll get into a little bit about the effects on the brain in just a second. But muscle is super important for fat loss. If you want to lose fat in my program, Revitalize, I first put you through a muscle building phase that I call Revitalize, because through that phase, we're revitalizing your muscle growth, we're revitalizing your metabolism and your hormones, so that you're actually able to lose fat effectively and you don't have to slash your calories really low. In fact, the more muscle you have, the more calories and food you're actually going to be able to eat, because the more muscle you have, the more calories you naturally burn in a day. But outside of that, because you only burn 15 extra calories a day per pound of muscle, the habits that you build while burning those or building that muscle is incredibly important. And those habits will lead to more fat loss, will lead to more calorie burn, so that you're able to eat more and lose more weight. Muscle also has a huge impact on longevity, like I talked about with the sarcopenia and losing muscle. You don't want to, have grandkids and then not be able to get down on the floor and play with them, not be able to pick them up because you have that muscle loss. And, a really harsh truth is that whenever people are getting older, they kind of get into that elderly range. If they fall and they break a hip, they break something in their leg, and they're put into like a wheelchair or they're very sedentary after that, that causes a ton of issues, and that shortens lifespan by a great deal. And so you want to have that muscle to keep your bone density and have a better chance at a healthier life past, midlife, 50s, 60s, into your 70s and 80s and beyond. So you want to be able to move freely in your 70s, 80s, and maybe even in your 90s if you're so lucky. And muscle is a key to that. It's also super important for you, if you're watching this, a woman over 40 dealing with hormone changes, because muscle helps with hormone production in women. Muscle naturally stimulates growth hormone. Muscle helps negate cortisol, unless you're working out too much. Because if you're working out too much, cortisol is going to stay elevated. But if you're doing it correctly, it's going to help with cortisol production. It's also going to help regulate your hormones through the menopause and perimenopause so that you don't have as many hot flashes. It's going to help regulate that thermal sensor in your hypothalamus. And so muscle is key for women, especially going through peri/menopause, to have a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? They're just stronger. Their muscles make them stronger, makes their hormones stronger, makes their bodies stronger and more capable of handling those hormone changes. Now, muscle's effect on the brain, which is super interesting. The first thing is going to be brain plasticity, which brain plasticity just means your brain is kind of like plastic. It's like kind of, just imagine it's like gummy, you can move it around. And the plasticity means that it can adapt to changes, good or bad changes. And so if you're not working out, you're not working on your brain health consistently, it can also shrink. It can get smaller. But part of that brain plasticity, whenever you're building muscle, gives you a lot more blood flow. It stimulates human growth hormone. And you actually have some quality adaptations to your brain, and your brain becomes more plastic, as you'd say, so it can handle the stress and the adaptation better. And actually published in Nature Reviews Neuroscience, it was found that regular exercise increases vascularization, helping to deliver nutrients and oxygen to brain cells more effectively, which is critical for cognitive performance. So strength training is key, but not just strength training, any exercise. Cardio is great for your brain too, but we're just talking about muscle growth right now, specifically because cardio is not necessarily the greatest for like fat loss and things for women over 40, but cardio is important as well. I'm just not talking about that today. Also, when you're strength training and building muscle, specifically when that human growth hormone is released, neurogenesis occurs, which is simply just the growth of new brain cells. And you always want to have new brain cells kind of growing and replacing the old brain cells that are kind of dying, because this is like the natural cycle of cells, right? In fact, my mom's brain, her scans showed dead areas in her brain where brain cells had died and new ones had not grown. So it's really important to build muscle for that neurogenesis. And a key study in Frontiers of Neuroscience demonstrated that strength training supports brain plasticity by triggering the release of neurotropic factors like BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotropic factors, which helps brain survive, grow, and form new connections. Brain-derived neurotropic factors is a protein in the brain and spinal cord that helps nerve cells survive and grow. So muscle and strength training is incredible for impacting your brain health through the neurogenesis, through increasing brain plasticity, and through the BDNF, the brain-derived neurotropic factor release. Muscles are also important in the brain for controlling inflammation, which is like a new fad word that everybody likes to throw around. Inflammation causes this, inflammation causes that. And inflammation, though, is important to understand. Inflammation in the brain is even more important to understand. Inflammation in the brain is shown to lead to greater increased risk of neurodegenerative diseases. And it's not good for the body necessarily. There are some forms of inflammation, like when you work out, you do have inflammation in your muscles, but then your muscles break down so that they can heal. So the inflammation is like a trigger to trigger the healing response there. But if we're especially looking at chronic disease and with other factors like stress, lack of muscle, a sedentary lifestyle, etc., you're going to have a lot more inflammation in the body. Again, if you have that lack of muscle, you're sedentary, you're not lifting weights, you're not working out, your body cannot handle the stress of that inflammation as well as it could if you had the muscle. Resistance training and muscle growth reduce chronic inflammation, especially if you pair that with a solid diet. It also reduces oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is an imbalance of free radicals, and the way to get rid of oxidative stress is, putting antioxidants into your body. Oxidative stress, essentially, all it does is those free radicals just damage your cells over time. And so you don't want that oxidative stress. Antioxidants like berries are really good for that, or working out is a way to manage the oxidative stress. Both the inflammation and the oxidative stress are shown, like I said, to increase risk with brain aging pretty heavily. Strength training's anti-inflammatory effects are beneficial in maintaining a healthy brain environment as well, particularly for middle-aged and older women, because you have such a crazy array of hormones kind of flying everywhere through perimenopause and then bottoming out in menopause, that you need this strength training, you need that muscle to counterbalance kind of the large inflammatory response you're having through peri and menopause. Research published in the Journal of Gerontology found that resistance exercise significantly lowers markers of inflammation and oxidative stress. Resistance exercise likely reduces inflammation by enhancing antioxidant defenses within the body, promoting muscle repair, and regulating the production of inflammatory cytokines. And cytokines are signaling proteins that help control inflammation in the body. So, as you can tell, a lot goes into inflammation. There's a lot more that I'm not even talking about that goes into inflammation with nutrition for your brain health. But strength training and building muscle is incredibly good for your brain, especially for the anti-inflammatory response and for managing oxidative stress in the body. Muscle also is vital as you age, as I talked about. Muscle benefits everything. The more muscle you have, to an extent, right? You don't want to necessarily need to look like somebody who's on stage for Olympia bodybuilding prep. That's a lot of muscle, and it takes a lot to upkeep that. But the normal amount of muscle in the normal human being is important and can be done fairly easily. Muscle growth helps significantly with hormone regulation, as it helps regulate cortisol levels like I talked about earlier, and it helps improve insulin sensitivity because the more muscle you have, the better insulin control you have, and the better you can respond to glucose whenever it's inserted into the body. You can also reduce the negative cognitive effects associated with chronic stress and insulin resistance the more muscle growth you have to help regulate those hormones. It assists in managing the mass decrease in estrogen through peri/menopause, like I just talked about, because during perimenopause, your hormones are in a chart would look kind of like boom, boom, here, all over the place. And then as you enter into menopause, they just kind of and bottom out and are pretty flat, especially estrogen. So it assists in managing that decrease, and you're able to handle it a lot better. Data from the study of women's health across the nation, SWAN, found that lean body mass or muscle is negatively associated with vasomotor symptoms like hot flashes and night sweats, and that maintaining higher levels of lean body mass during the menopause transition may protect against the development of these disruptive menopausal symptoms. So, to break it down even simpler, the more lean body mass, the more lean muscle that they had, the less hot flashes and night sweats that they had through menopause. Metabolic health and weight is also one of the largest factors to consider for muscle, particularly for your ability to eat more food to fuel without gaining weight, like I talked about before, so that you can actually eat as much as you want. As like a comfort thing, you can kind of eat more food than you typically used to, but also it makes it a lot easier to eat nutrient-dense foods, and enough of them to get the micronutrients that your body and brain need. So that's super important, because if your body can only intake 1,300 calories a day without gaining weight, which is not a lot at all, you're not going to be getting the nutrients that your brain needs, and you're going to be causing a lot of that inflammation that we talked about, and your brain's not going to have the fuel that it needs to function day to day. And finally, it improves your mood. So muscle strengthening exercise contributes to the release of endorphins, it releases dopamine, it releases serotonin, and other feel-good chemicals, helping alleviate symptoms of anxiety and depression, which both contribute to elevated cortisol and then elevated inflammation. I actually wrote a blog post about this. That blog post is going to be in the description of this video if you want to go check that out. You can check that out at my blog. A psychiatry review also highlighted the role of physical exercise, including resistance training, in boosting mood, which indirectly supports brain function by reducing mental fatigue and enhancing clarity. So muscle is so vital, especially as you age, and especially as you go through peri/menopause, to manage the symptoms that kind of pop up with that. So right now, if you're listening to this and you are in peri/menopause, and you're going through the hormone changes, you're being put through the ringer by the symptoms. A lot of the symptoms you might not even notice. Brain fog is one of the main ones, outside of like the hormonal shifts with hot flashes and such. But anxiety also pops up. Worry also pops up. Having insane thoughts, and you're thinking like, why did I just think about that? Why am I so stressed about this? Something doesn't even matter, is also could be caused by these hormonal shifts. So understanding that is important, and understanding that building muscle, getting in the gym and lifting weights can help with that. But there's also a lot of other factors that go into it. So don't take this as like the only thing. Okay, this is just to help. So wrapping up here, the brain benefits from every aspect of muscle growth. I mean, you cannot go wrong with muscle growth and brain health. The more effective muscle growth you have, and the more you're getting in the gym, the healthier your brain's going to be, from weight loss to mood to the inner workings of your hormones and everything in between. Especially for women over 40, muscle is vital to consider, because women are 3 times more likely to develop dementia than men, especially during menopause, and those hormone changes are expected as the reason for that. Muscle is also the cornerstone to fat loss and getting the tone look that you want. As you start building muscle, you're going to love the way you look a lot sooner than if you just tried to lose fat. Because if you just try to lose fat, you're also going to lose muscle, and you're not necessarily even going to like the way you look when you get to that number on the scale, and you're not going to like the way you feel. So building muscle is important, and this is why every one of my clients does this first when they join the program. And strength training, not cardio, is the #1 exercise to lose fat based on recent studies. I just thought I'd throw that in there so that, because I mentioned all exercise is good for the brain, but if you want to lose fat as well, you need to strength train. Muscle is key. You're not going to build muscle doing cardio. You might build a little bit of muscle doing HIIT workouts, but as your hormones start changing, you need to strength train, which is a lot more slow and controlled. And this is just a blip into why I help women achieve optimal health in midlife. I obviously talked about, my mom developing dementia so early on, and that's why I do this. But I truly love helping women revitalize their lives so they can live a healthy, happy lifestyle. They can love the way they look in their clothes, and they can be confident in their health as they go through their 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. Because that is the most important thing to me, is that you feel confident and healthy in your own body and brain, because that's what's most important. If you have any questions on this podcast, feel free to drop them in the comments. Feel free to reach out to me and message me. My main account is on Facebook. You can follow me there, or on Instagram. And on Facebook, I have a free community. If you want to join that free community, that's also going to be linked in the description. Thank you for listening. And if you were listening, thank you for watching on YouTube if this is where you're watching. And I hope to see you next week.